9mm versus 40 Smith & Wesson and subcompact short barrels. What we have today is our Speer gold dot ammunition and 9mm 124 grain plus P versus our 40 Smith & Wesson 165 grain. Our 9mm plus P is rated at 1220 feet per second, and our 40 Smith & Wesson is rated at 1150 feet per second. So I'm going to use Taurus G2Cs and both of these to test these. Both have a 3.2 inch barrel, and we're going to see how these compare. So we're going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic test. I'm going to go into plain clear ballistics to see what the best potential is of those cartridges are, like the best potential for hollow point expansion and all of that, because sometimes more real world you don't get very good expansion on hollow points, and more real world would be clothing. So I'm going to test 4 layers of denim on the first 3-inch piece here that represents our pectoral muscle. After that, we'll have a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard that's going to represent hitting ribs or sternum. And to more clear ballistics, we'll see how they compare that way, more of our real world simulation. And then I am going to shoot at my steel to see what kind of practical accuracy I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we have our 9mm 124 grain plus P rated at 1220 feet per second. I believe that's to a 4-inch barrel. And we'll see what we get in our G2C here. So about 5 yards from that target. Let's see what we get here. 1205, 1188, 1198, 1200, 1213. So that's not bad velocity through a 3.2 inch barrel. 40 Smith & Wesson here, 165 grain rated at 1150 feet per second. Again, I believe through a 4-inch barrel. Let's see what I get here. 1062. Now read, my mag is dropping again with this Taurus. I thought I had fixed that. 1066. 1057. 1053. Yeah, with that, it's just whenever I put my pinky on the bottom of the magazine, it's just enough to pull that out. But if I remove my pinky from it, it doesn't fall out. So that's interesting. Let's hit our ballistics gel block and see how these compare. All right, our first shot is into plain clear ballistics, just our best potential. You know, we're not going to get hollow points clogging with denim or anything like that, so we should get good performance. So 9mm plus P, let's see what this gives us. A lot of force hitting that first 3-inch piece there. That's surprising. Now let's hit it with our 40 Smith & Wesson. Let's go take a look. All right, so both of these had really good energy dump in this first 3-inch piece here. Just really good overall. 9mm on the bottom, our 40 Smith & Wesson on top, just a little bit more energy dump, a little bit more tearing, but that coincides with its diameter. It's going to be a little bit bigger. So both of these did pretty good here for dumping energy and doing good tearing damage. And that's what I like to see. I like to see actual tearing through this clear ballistics, and you can kind of tell what I mean by that. There's like sharp lines in it. That indicates cutting by those hollow point petals being expanded out versus, you know, sometimes you see tumbling. It looks kind of like bubbles. So what I'm seeing here indicates very good performance. So what we got with our 9mm, we got a penetration of about 14 3/4 inches penetration. And then the bullet came back just a little bit, bounced back a little bit, and that's a phenomenon with clear ballistics, but it doesn't really make much difference because it still penetrated to that depth before it did that. With our 40 Smith & Wesson, we're looking at about 16 inches even of penetration and then some bounce back of that bullet. So both have really good expansion, so they look really good. Now let's do more of our real world simulation. Gold Dot's known for being kind of barrier blind when it comes to this stuff because it has kind of a thin plated coating on it. It's not a plating and it's not a jacket either. It's kind of in between. but it does pretty good through barriers. So let's try our denim MDF and see how they compare that way. All right, 4 layers of denim and a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard after 3 inches of clear ballistics. See how our 9mm does. All right, let me set that back up and hit it with the 40 Smith & Wesson. All right, 40 Smith & Wesson, same thing. Let's see what this does. Let's go take a look. All right, so both had pretty good performance as far as the damage and cutting and all of that. Actually, when we look at this, we have a larger hole through our MDF with our 9mm versus our 40 Smith & Wesson. So we had a lot more expansion and energy dump. Well, it doesn't really look like more, but through this, it looks like there'd be a larger diameter going through. 9mm arced down kind of a weird way, and it came down and hit the bottom of the shelf here. And the bullet is resting here at about 20 and a half inches. And it has good expansion. But when we look at our 40 Smith & Wesson, there's a lot of good damage going through there. But we only penetrated to 19 inches, which I would say that's actually more ideal because we didn't over penetrate really. But there's definitely some limited expansion going on with that. I thought for sure we would still get good expansion with that, but it looks like we did not. It limited that expansion, but at the same time, it didn't significantly over penetrate or anything like that. And it looks like it still did pretty well. So let's shoot our steel, see what kind of practical accuracy we can get with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets here, and this is through our plain gel with our 9mm and our 40 Smith & Wesson. And what we can see is both expanded really well. It's really hard to tell right now before I measure them, you know, which one's bigger, but they both look about the same. Obviously, our 40's got a longer base because it's a heavier bullet. Our 9mm peeled back quite well and penetrated adequately for how, you know, how much sectional density it basically lost, because it's very, you know, it's not very long and it's very wide. So to penetrate that far is actually pretty impressive for it to expand that well and to penetrate that far. It had a lot of energy dump. Now when we go through our medium density fiberboard, this is what I typically see. You know, we lower that expansion a bit. A lot of that's from the denim. Lowers the expansion, makes it a bit smaller. Now with our 40 Smith & Wesson, there just wasn't enough velocity and energy there to open that up. You know, we have a little bit of expansion on a couple of those pedals, but not as good as this here. But you have to remember it started out bigger, so it's nearly as big as that expanded 9mm. It just looks less impressive, but yeah, I would say there's definitely more size on this expanded 9mm than this 40 Smith & Wesson. So when we go down to a short barrel like that, even though this stuff works fantastic in a 5-inch barrel, I've tested it with the 165 grain 40, going down to that 3.2-inch barrel, it's just not enough barrel length for it to work very well. So 9mm, 40, both aren't too bad, but obviously our 9mm performed just a little bit better. So that's a close-up look at those. All right, I'm 12 yards from the target. I want to see how these run in comparison to each other, if that 40 Smith & Wesson will run. So just for follow-up shots and recoil control, let's see what I can do with our 9mm. And that shoots pretty well for me for practical accuracy. 40 Smith & Wesson. Now it ain't gonna run for me. And that's one of those things, I hate making these ballistic test videos about the firearms because I'm not really into like firearms in the sense of what's good, what's bad. I'd like to use something that's just gonna get the test done. But I've pretty much exhausted all options with this. The reason why this whole grip is on here is so that I'm definitely not touching that magazine release. Now if I keep my pinky off the bottom of that mag, it generally runs better. So in that sense it runs fine, but anytime I put any pressure down here on the bottom of this mag, it's enough to pop that out. But still, we're able to see that with 40 Smith & Wesson and 9mm. When we go down to a subcompact, it kind of evens things out a little bit where, yeah, the 40's a little more snappy, but so is the 9mm at that point. Once you go to a 9mm+P and a really short barrel, when you're getting up these higher upper 300s, 400 foot-pounds energy range of a 9mm+P, they're a little bit more comparable than what you would think they would be. So let me back it up just a little bit more, see if I can keep hitting from, let's do 25 yards. All right, 25 yards from the target. See how our 9mm does. So they're shooting a little bit lower than my point of aim, so let me see if I can get a headshot. I'll have to aim over the target. A little bit too much. Alright, that's hard to do because I got to aim over the target and still keep one eye open to see that silhouette. So 40 Smith & Wesson. See if I make any hits with this, see if there's any more power on that plate. It definitely hits a lot harder. I'm not going to attempt a headshot with this because, yeah, that's pushing my luck a little bit with something like this. But you can see that when I have to remove my pinky off there's a bit more recoil going on. This thing jumps up pretty good. And it's still having an issue here. Yeah, I don't know how that happened. But yeah, let's try not to make this entire video about this. I've had enough with this. I'm sending that back to Taurus now. I said that for the past like 3 videos, but yeah, this is a waste of my time to not send it in and have them fix that. The reason why I normally don't do that is because anytime I've had Taurus fix something, they always give me the runaround. They send it back in the same condition that they sent it in and said there's nothing wrong with it. And then after about the 5th or 6th time sending something back, they're like, well, it's out of spec, so we're going to send you a new one. And then I got to pay for another FFL fee. And then at that point, this, you know, great savings that I had for $250 becomes into this fiasco of a $450 I've put out to try to make the thing right. I could have just bought an M&P to begin with. So enough with that. This video is about the ballistics of these handgun cartridges. And what I can see here, at least with this ammunition, I'm not sure that we're really gaining much by going to 40 Smith & Wesson in a short barrel. I absolutely love the 40 Smith & Wesson. I look at some of the track record of it through duty size pistols, and I fully believe that it is significantly better than the 9mm for stopping threats. But when we go down to something like this, where a lot of other things come into play, like reliability, and it's not just this particular pistol, I've seen this in a lot of pistols, where the full-size counterparts will run pretty good. You go down to something smaller, and now they're not running good, unless it's a 9mm. I've seen that a lot. You can also kind of say the same thing about revolvers. You might have a cartridge that performs perfectly well, but once you go down to a snub, the recoil kind of is so much that's almost not worth whatever ballistic performance you can get out of it. So when we're talking subcompact pistols here, I don't think that going to a 40 Smith & Wesson is necessarily the best idea out there. I think if you're carrying semi-automatics, I think you're much better well off with a 40 Smith & Wesson full size. But when you're going down to something subcompact, the 9mm is going to be a little bit better because of the reliability. But when you go up to something big, 40 Smith & Wesson, in my opinion and my experience, has always been more reliable across the board. So yeah, I would say in this test right here, a 9mm is a better option because it just energy dumped better. It had better overall performance because we're moving really fast, and yet even at that energy level, the lighter bullet weight makes it more controllable. So You know, I'm a kind of person that really does not like 9mm, but in this test, it did better than the 40 Smith & Wesson in my opinion. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.